filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive, and it's my great pleasure to have with me saxophonist and reed man Jerry Dodgion. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
I wonder, you're a Californian originally, right?
Sure.
I wonder during these winters here if you ever wish you still were.
Well, I've been here a little while.
Yeah.
I guess I came in 1961. I thought maybe we'd stay about 5 years.
Uh-huh.
So I think the 5 years isn't up yet, so this is 96.
So
35 years.
You found work here then to keep you here.
Yeah, well, sure. I think New York's the greatest place in the world if you have a good reason to be here.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Can you tell me, what was pop music? What was the pop music of the time when you were first starting on your instrument? And did it influence where you went as a musician at all?
Gee, I don't know. The pop music I remember was just radio. You know, it was just bands and singers, and that was in the late 40s and early 50s, and so. But when I got interested in it, it was in school. You know, and I just got lucky. I started working with professional musicians when I was in high school, and worked with some local bands around San Francisco that were great and very encouraging. And the pop music stuff, I didn't find out till I just really wasn't too interested in the real hardcore pop. And that was like
It was the era of I guess the big band era had kind of ended now.
It was over actually, but I mean there was still remnants of stuff happening. And then there were a lot of records being made with bands with singers, with the singers featured instead of the band being featured. So, as a matter of fact, when I eventually moved to New York, I'd been playing with Red Norvo for 3 years with the quintet, and we played all over. We played in Las Vegas a lot. We played for Frank Sinatra for his personal appearances for about 1.5 years, and we played with Benny Goodman several times during that time, and our first time to Europe and everything like that. It was it was really a great experience for me. And then when I did leave Red and stay in New York, the work that I started to do, mainly through I knew Jerome Richardson from San Francisco, and we'd played together in Gerald Wilson's band there. And so when I came to New York, he encouraged me to come and everything, and he helped me a great deal. I mean, my first recording date when I was here, he called me because he was contracting for Quincy Jones. So my very first record date was with Quincy Jones and Dinah Washington. That was like, it was wonderful. So somebody said, "How do you like New York so far?" First day, it was great.
That's wonderful. So much of the music business is getting work through friends and establishing contacts.
Yeah. But in those days, the pop music was still jazz oriented, more so. You know, then later on it became more rock and roll, even eighth note oriented. So it changes. It's changing all the time.
Can I just back up? You just said even note oriented. Is that
even eighth note? Yeah.
Yes. See, I never heard anybody quite describe. We know that how swing eighth notes go and how rock and roll eighth notes go, but no one ever exactly said the music became even note oriented. That's very interesting.
Well,
to me.
if you talk to some drummers, they might tell you that.
Yeah.
Because that's the basic thing. It's a even eighth note as opposed to the 12/8 smooth flowing. Yeah.
Yeah. And New York had a very active recording scene at that time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And were you working with your wife at that time?
We did do some work together. She played with us. Dottie played with us with Benny Goodman for 2 weeks at Basin Street East. And then later on she played with Marion McPartland. I used to go and sit in with them sometimes. And occasionally we'd work some quartet gigs here and there, you know.
Right. Well, you mentioned some pretty big names in the business, Sinatra and Benny Goodman. What was it like to work with those gentlemen?
Oh, for me it was great. I mean, it was all first-time experience, and I loved it every minute. Well, you know, something new happening all the time, learning something about this and learning about that.
Yeah.
And working with really great musicians that were really great human beings, you know. So it was just a constant role of learning and having fun at the same time, all mixed up together.
Yeah.
It was really great.
Were you required to play all the woodwinds at the time at the flute and
No, well, with
clarinet?
Red I played just alto and flute. But I didn't play any clarinet with him, but I had been playing the clarinet for years, you know, since one of my first teachers. But I'm still not really a multi-reed. I don't consider myself a multi-reed specialist. I play the alto sax, the soprano sax,
Yeah.
the clarinet, and the flute.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Stay away from those double reeds. They,
Oh, yeah,
they can be,
I have enough trouble with a single reed.
yeah, they're nasty.
It's-
Oh, my. Well, you've been with some of the great big bands, and from Gerald Wilson through Benny Carter, and
Right, right.
yeah. Tell me how the Thad Jones-Mel Lewis band kind of gelled into a great organization.
Gee, that was, I knew Thad. I had met him in San Francisco when he was with Count Basie, and we'd played together at an after-hours place there. And I'd met Mel through playing with Peggy Lee in New York, and then eventually with Benny Goodman. We went to Russia with Mel was the drummer with Benny Goodman. And I knew both these guys separately.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know them together, you know. And then Mel called one day and said, "Oh, Thad Jones and I are starting a band, and we'd like you to play in the band. Would you be interested?" I said I wouldn't miss it for anything. I couldn't. I knew them separately, and I thought this is the odd couple of all time. This maybe it'll be one rehearsal. It'll be terrific.
Yeah.
It's got to be wonderful. And so who knows? You know. So it turned out to be a magnificent marriage of two different individuals. You know.
Right.
It was a great experience. It was the best musical experience I could ever imagine myself in. That I could, you know, it was too late for me to play with Duke Ellington, and so
Right, right.
it was something new that was really great, and I loved it. I really loved it. I learned a lot. And Thad was, besides the most fantastic musician in his soloing. I mean, he soloed like nobody. He didn't sound like anybody else. He was a total individual, just
Mhm.
beautiful soloist, and that's who I'd heard play with Count Basie. Heard the band many times. And then to find out he could write like I knew he could write beautifully because I heard some of the Count Basie arrangements he did. And then his writing was unbelievable. And then, but many people don't know that didn't see the band, don't know what a great conductor he was.
Oh,
Fantastic conductor that he was in total control of the band, the rhythmic pulse, everything. It was just wonderful.
I wish I could have seen something at the Vanguard just to see the band fit in there, first of all. It must have been a little crowded.
Well, we sat very close together there, and it was very funny that the first time we played out of the Vanguard, we had one concert in someplace in Long Island at a college. I can't remember which, and Monk had just played. Jackie McLean was playing with Monk, and then we went on, and we were not sitting close together. And after we played the first tune, and Brookmeyer sitting behind me, I hear him say, "I told you guys couldn't play outside of the Vanguard. It sounds terrible." You know? So that had everybody sit closer
Yeah.
together. So we sat closer together like we did at the Vanguard, and then the band started to sound good
Amazing.
again. So it was
Yeah.
really funny. It was a great experience.
Neat. I want to read something that was written about you in the Grove Dictionary of Jazz. See if you think that this guy knows what he's talking. It says, Dodgion's saxophone playing, influenced by that of Charlie Parker, Art Pepper, and Jerome Richardson, is well represented by his inventive solo on Tiptoe, which draws on blues formulas and demonstrates a relaxed rhythmic sense and ability to develop motifs.
Gee, that's pretty formal. I guess.
Did you know you were a motific developer?
Well, I never thought of it that way, but that's not. It's complimentary. It's
Yes,
okay.
it is nice. Do you, when you play, do you think about developing little lines and so forth, or is that it just comes?
That's hard, you know, because I never did really study how to play jazz. Like they have colleges and
Right.
that you can go to, and you can major in jazz. You can learn. You can learn in 3 weeks now what took me 15 years to learn. But I know it's information-wise, you know.
Right.
So it's really, it's hard for me, and I'm not a teacher either. I don't do any teaching. So it's hard for me to tell somebody how I feel about what I'm doing. And it
Yeah.
really is. So maybe if I were better at that, I would have been a teacher. I don't know. But,
Yeah. Well, sometimes your own style is the hardest to talk about. I know I read about one fellow who did a very extensive study on Sonny Rollins and how he apparently developed all these motifs, and after Sonny Rollins read it, and then he felt he couldn't do it anymore because now he was thinking too hard about it, where before it was just a natural thing. Now someone tells him what he's doing, it's hard to do now.
yeah, that's possible that, because when you're doing it, you're not, when I'm doing it anyway, I'm not thinking of how I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I know you just try to play your best and fit in with what's happening around you. That's the main thing for me. I mean, if I play with sensitive players, it's very easy to play,
Yeah.
and you don't get tired, and you have a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And if you play with people that aren't sensitive that aren't listening to each other and stuff, pretty soon you find, hey, I'm really getting tired, and the music's not fun. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, without getting too analytical about it, it's just if it's not fun and it's not happening, it's it's not happening. And just to keep playing and keep to try to make it happen, it's futile sometimes,
Yeah.
because when it's really happening, it's not because you're making it happen. I don't think. I think when it's really happening, it's when you're letting it happen,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the best stuff.
That's putting it pretty well. How did the couple you played on this particular record with Basie?
Oh, that one.
Yeah, remember that one?
Sure, I do.
Nice record. And how did that come about?
Gee, well, I knew almost everybody in the band from I'd gone to hear the band so much in those years, and one day Billy Mitchell called me, and he said, "What are you doing Thursday?" I said, "I'm not doing anything." "Why?" He said, "Well, would you like to make a recording date with Count Basie?" I said, "That's why I'm alive." I mean, that's the dream, unbelievable. That's never going to happen. Well, he said Bobby Plater had to take off the because he was writing a date for Lockjaw that was scheduled at the exact same time. So he couldn't be there, so I come in and play. I said, "Great." So I got to play with Marshall Royal,
Mm-hmm.
and that was with Basie, and that was always a dream too, because he was the consummate lead alto player for that band. As Thad used to say, tailor-made lead alto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was really a thrill. It was
Yeah.
just wonderful.
Did they spend a lot of time in those sessions? Or was it pretty much a couple takes and?
Well, the band, these arrangements were by Chico O'Farrell, who was a really great writer, and people don't realize how great he is and how he can handle a variety of situations. It's really very musically. Well, the band had been playing together. The band was on the road. They've been playing, and to put a new arrangement in front of them, it didn't take very long at all. I mean, they read very well. They did that particular band was very versatile. They played for singers. Sometimes they play for Frank Sinatra. Or they play for Tony Bennett or somebody, and they could make a rehearsal and learn the music in a couple hours.
Yeah.
And that was very, very, very professional band.
Mm-hmm.
And just to sit in there and sit next to Marshall and hear all the saxes. In those days, they recorded with the saxes sitting around in a circle around the microphone. Which I don't know why they gave that up. I guess I don't know, but it's really great because you balance yourself. The sound balance. You hear everybody. You can hear everybody in the section. Now, when they put you in a straight line, the people at each end don't hear. You don't hear equally. So the leader has to say, "Oh, you're too loud and you're too soft," and there's stuff that you know.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting in a circle with saxophones, you can really get inside as a unit. It's great.
Who was playing drums on that?
Ed
during that
Shaughnessy
time?
played drums on that.
Yeah,
that's
right.
And he did great. He was added for that date, and And Sweets was on the band too. Harry Edison was on the band. That's the first time well, not the first time I'd played in a recording with him, but where he soloed and everything. It was really, really great.
Yeah, the arrangements did a good job of, you know, the theme was Broadway tunes or whatever, and to fit them in the Basie style, you know,
Well, this was the Hollywood one, right?
yeah, Hollywood,
Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
with the movie themes and like, yeah.
That's great. Did you get a chance again to record with them?
Yeah, several years later, I didn't even know it was with Count Basie, which is good because I would probably been nervous. I got a call for 3 days of recording with Chico O'Farrell, and you know, on an answering service. And I showed up, and it's Count Basie's band. I'm looking around. I was just, am I in the right studio? So I see Chico, and I said, I guess so. So that was really great. That was a lot of fun too. That was an album called Basic Basie, I think. And he even played a few solos on that, which I, you know, was a little apprehensive about. But and I mean, Lockjaw was on that too. He made that great recording of Bewitched on one of those days. It was great. It was really wonderful to see this, be in there and be part of it happening, because I'd loved the music so much and heard it on record so much, and heard the band in person. I heard the band in person a lot.
Yeah.
And that band, the band of the 50s and 60s, was an unbelievable ensemble band, maybe one of the best ever. They could play with the great swing and feeling and emotion and everything, but together. And the ensemble was just so together. It was thrilling. And the dynamics, unbelievable. I mean, they could play softer than we're talking now, the whole band. And you could still hear the bass with no amplifier. Frank Weston played a flute. They had Thad did some things with flute and bass, and you could hear them.
Wow.
Now, what I don't know, when the amplification came in, it changed everything, you know. The bass became louder than the band, and you could not hear this unless you turned up the mic, and when the flute player turned up his mic, then the bass player turned up his mic, and then here, if there's a guitar player, forget it, and here we go, and there's no end to this stuff. We just,
Here we
you know.
go.
But the real sensitive part of playing acoustically, that band just was the best ever. I couldn't believe it.
Fantastic.
Well, it was a great experience trying to play in that context, you know.
Yeah. Who were the fellas, you know, according to our dictionary here, you were influenced by Charlie Parker, and is that a fair statement?
Well, sure, I guess.
Wasn't everybody, I guess?
I guess, sure. I mean, I was never good enough to copy anybody, so I just probably, you know, in the words of Pepper Adams, one time we were doing a clinic with Thad Jones' saxophone section. We had about 200 saxophone players in the room. And, so I said, we can't give you a saxophone lesson in an hour and a half, but if you ask some questions, you'll get 5 different answers from professionals, and maybe give you a really an idea of what your answer is, whether it's career-minded or whatever it is, music or whatever, you know. So somebody asked the question, who do you copy when you're learning to improvise? And I think Billy Harper said, well, I don't copy anybody, you know, I got my own stuff, you know. And, you know, and then Ed Hickus says, well, you know, I listen to Charlie Parker and Lester Young and so-and-so and so-and-so. And I said basically the same thing. I listened to records, you know, I heard Lester Young, Charlie Parker, and Johnny Hodges, you name it, yeah. And then Ron Bridgewater said something, I don't remember what he said, but when Pepper, when Pepper spoke, he said, well, you know, he says, when you copy from one person, he says, that's plagiarism. He says, but if you copy from everybody, it's called research. And so we just fell out. I said, why didn't he speak first? And we wouldn't have to make a fool of ourselves. You know, it's such a dumb, I mean, it's a question. It's so, if you say one word and it takes you 5 minutes to cover up what you just said in your own answer, you know, it's out.
It's an excellent answer. Clark Terry, you know, he has the Asians. He says first there's imitation, and then I think he said assimilation, and then, you know, you creation of your own thing, that kind of thing.
Well, he's one of the masters of all time. He's just magnificent. I got a chance to play with him a few times. It was just unbelievable, just wonderful enjoyment, fun, and a music lesson too. It's just everything,
So you mentioned having a service, and they would call you. A typical week for a New York musician could involve a lot of different kind of work. Is that right?
Oh yeah, sure.
And what were some of the things that maybe weren't as exciting as performing with Count Basie that you do on a day-to-day basis to allow you to live in New York?
Well, oh, geez. It's hard to, hard to put that together. I can tell you a story about when I first moved here. I called Jerome Richardson because he'd been, encouraged me to come in. And he said, really encouraged, leaning on me to really. And I met Oliver Nelson when we were playing with Frank Sinatra with Red Norvo. I met him in Atlantic City. He was playing with Wild Bill Davis. And then later he was playing with Basie for a short while when we were in Las Vegas. So Oliver said, when you come to New York, call me. So I just called those two guys and ended up on the Quincy Jones recording dates and Oliver Nelson recording dates. And I see Irby Green on these dates. And Irby I met from playing with Benny Goodman with Red Norvo, And Irby says, Jerry, I see you're on all the best dates. I said, what do you mean? Aren't they all like this? That's all I was doing. I wasn't doing a lot of work, but the work was great caliber. It was just wonderful. He said, no, they're not all like this. Well, other stuff, in those days, a lot of it was pretty interesting because there were a lot of big bands playing for singers, I mean, even the pop music of the day was, we did dates with Quincy for Sarah Vaughan, and it was just a lot of fun, and the beauty and the exchange between the musicians and the fraternity of musicians was really great. It was just wonderful. I always felt that I was welcomed and for whatever I could contribute,
Right.
And I got the chance to learn from it.
And
I've just never been able to reciprocate.
Uh-huh.
I have not. It's when young musicians come now, I can't there's not that kind of work around. I can't steer them into anything.
Right, I
it's
see.
It's a different. It's a different time. Just like that was a different time than what preceded it. Too.
Yeah. I wanted to mention this one record here that was done with Thad and Joe.
Oh.
Remember that one? I think you play on that one too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, with Joe Williams. Oh, now he's another special case. Oh, man. We met when I was with Red Norvo. We played Las Vegas a lot, and when the band started coming to the Flamingo there, they come in for 3 or 4 weeks at a time sometimes. And so we met Joe, and he's a really beautiful person, and he was part of the band. He was not a star with the band. They traveled together, these guys, and they roomed together, and he was just like one of the guys in the band. There was a humanity thing happening with the Basie band that was just wonderful. It was just a joy to watch, and to be able to touch it a little bit was just a great for me. On this particular date, when we made this, it was so funny with Thad and Mel's band. Whenever we didn't rehearse very much, and in some of the chronicles they say it was a rehearsal band, and then it became a band. It was never a rehearsal band, and Thad and Mel hated the word rehearsal band. They started a band to have a band, and when people say this was a rehearsal band, they hated it. It's not true. Duke Pearson's band rehearsed every week for a year, and they never called him a rehearsal band. Thad and Mel had 2 rehearsals, went into the Vanguard, and they called it a rehearsal band. That was very unfair. It's no big deal to me, but to them it was really,
I guess they just meant that the band didn't tour around the country.
I don't know.
Gee, a gig at the Vanguard is hardly a rehearsal.
Yeah. But anyway, when we did rehearse, it was, you know, we'd have to rehearse like at midnight or something because a lot of the guys had studio work in a day. Not me so much. I was never really a full-time studio player.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a lot of work. There were a lot of guys that were full-time studio, but there was so much work that there was overflow work all the time. So then you got called by people you didn't know lots of times because of recommendations, just to go in and deal with whatever you had to do. Very challenging stuff sometimes, you know, when you're playing the saxophone is one thing, and when you play the flute, you can be saying, oh, I'm going to be able to handle this, and you turn the page, and all of a sudden you're in another world, and maybe you're playing alone with a harp or something, you know, it's very sensitive stuff.
Wow.
You've just been playing in a circus on the page before, who knows? But it's a... But back to this was really exceptional. I remember this so well because in order to get the band and Joe together, the scheduling was ridiculous. We started at 8 in the morning on a couple of the days, and one was at 7 in the morning.
Oh, Lord.
Now, this is okay. For the band, that's unusual. No, dates usually start at 10. So what's 8? 8's okay, but 7, unheard of. But Joe Williams, during that week, was working at the half note. That I went down to hear that. I mean, they finished at the half note at 3:45 in the morning. So he was singing every night till 3:45, and then he would make this come in for one of these record dates at 7 o'clock. You know, so there's no sleep for him.
Yeah.
I mean, and he just did great. And if you hear this record, you have no idea that he was up all night to do these. I mean, that's just unbelievable. That's just.
I was gonna think if he had just gotten out of bed for that, you wouldn't be able to hear his voice because it'd be so low.
Yeah, so to take a nap would be ridiculous. That would.
Yeah.
So, but you know, there's something about when everything's going right, and it's for a really good. And you just pull up everything you have to do it. You know, it just happens. You know, it's sometimes when you're a little exhausted, you don't have time to get nervous or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just save all the energy for what it's really meant for, and it works that way sometimes.
Very interesting.
But just try to do it on purpose and see what happens.
Right. What about?
But I'll never forget that though. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's out on CD now.
Yeah.
And
it sounds great. Quite a band there too.
Oh yeah.
And eventually you stepped into Jerome's spot.
Yeah, well, he left.
Became the lead player, right?
He left to go to California in '72, I guess. So.
What about, you've been around the world a little bit with some different groups.
Yes,
Did
I've
you
been
enjoy
very
traveling
fortunate.
like that?
Oh yeah, I was really fortunate to do some traveling. I know that I could have never done it on my own. To see the variety of stuff and see how people live and how music is different in different places and the food, everything. Traveling's one of the greatest things you can do if you do it under good conditions, you know. But I think my first time was with Benny Goodman in Russia. I'm not in Russia, but in Europe in 1959. It was with a small band where he hired Red Norval's quintet, which is pianoless, and added Jack Sheldon and Bill Harris and Flip Phillips. So then he had arrangements written for the four horns, which made it a 10-piece band. Then we toured Europe and had a great time, and I just see more and more stories coming. I'm going to slow down the interview here.
That's okay. We like stories.
All the Benny Goodman stories are true, you know. So that'll cover a lot right there. And but I just learned a lot. It was just a lot with Flip Phillips. I mean, what a wonderful musician he is, and he is to this day. He's 80 now, and he still plays wonderfully, amazing, just great. And he was such a moving spirit in this band. I mean, he always had a great sense of humor. And of course, Bill Harris has a sense of humor, and we did a lot of laughing. It was great. Whenever Benny would start to get a little tense, and you know, it's just thinking, well, what's going to happen now? Flip would call Benny aside and say, Benny, I'd like to talk to you for a minute. And he'd talk to him for a minute and get him laughing and come back and we'd be okay for about 3 days. We're just laughing and having really fun. The music's better, everything's better. And then Benny started Flip would say, come here. He'd talk to him about, he said, you know, he talked to him for a while. I remember hearing one talk to him once. He said to Benny, he says, you know, Pops, you don't have to make a name for yourself. You're already the king of swing, you know. And you know, we should be having a good time playing music like we are. He said, you don't pay us enough that we should get nervous here, you know. And it was just great. And then pretty soon he ended up by telling him, you have to remember this. Remember IWS. And Benny says, IWS? What's that? He says, I won't snap. And and we just, everybody would laugh. So that was the slogan of the tour, IWS. And without Flip, it could have been very, you know,
difficult.
A lot different. It was just great. And every way, and musically, he played great all the time, every time. Just.
Well, that's great. We hope to see Flip in April in Florida. So
I think his birthday's in April.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Speaking about, they called him Pops.
No,
Benny was Pops, is that right?
Well, Flip called him Pops because he called everybody else Pops. You know, it's like when Louis Armstrong called people Pops, but he was Pops. But when he talked to you, he said, hey, Pops, you want to do this?
And Lionel Hampton calls everybody Gates.
Yeah, well, he does that. Yeah, that's right.
Now, you were the deacon, is that right?
Well, that's one of the Thad had little names for people now and then. He called me Deacon Dodgion a few times.
Deacon Dodgion.
Yeah.
All right. Was there a reason for that, or was it just
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know. It just
sounded good.
Yeah, maybe it just phonetically it was good. You know, I don't think there was any deep spiritual attachment there. But Thad was he was marvelous. He just brought the best out of everyone. I mean, anyone that came into the band to play, even just for a few days or a day, they'd walk away with, oh, how did I do that? I can't do that. I can't play that. But he would do that. He just brought the best out of everyone. I mean, the humanity level was great. The music was great. It was just the greatest experience imaginable. So when I started doing dates with, you know, you do an orchestra date or something, and the guy next to you went to Juilliard, and he's talking about Juilliard, and the guy on this side, so he went to Curtis, you know. They're talking about the conservatories, and then they look at me like I'm supposed to say something. I said, well, I went to the Vanguard Conservatory. I said, I'm still there. Actually, you know, at this time I was in the conservatory for 12 years, and they looked very, you know, quizzical looks. What is? Never heard of that one, you know. It was a lot of fun, though.
No better experience than that.
Oh, unbelievable.
And what's your weeks like these days? Playing different kinds of things now?
Well, it's still a variety of stuff that happens. It's really wonderful. I play in the Carnegie Hall Band that John Faddis leads, and we do 4 concerts a year in Carnegie Hall, and then we've been getting some more outside work. We went to Japan the year before last for a week, a festival. And we went to South America this past November for 10 days, and we're going to Mexico City in a couple of weeks. And we do some of the festivals in Europe this summer. The well-traveled path.
Wow.
And more and more stuff coming up. And every concert is different because there's new music written for each concert. And it's really interesting. It really keeps you on your toes. And John is developing into an excellent band leader now. His experience with Thad helped him quite a bit. So maybe you get a chance, you might talk to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Who else is playing in that group?
Well, in the saxophones, there's Frank West and Dick Oates, Ralph LaLama, Barry Samoan. Slide Hampton's in the band, and he writes for the band too, which is.
We know that. We heard that the other night.
Oh yes, well, you know, he's been a great
goodness.
writer for a long time, and he's just wonderful. He's still growing. It's just wonderful. It's great. And the trumpet section with that band's always great because you know, they has Lou Soloff and Earl Gardner and Byron Stripling and Randy Brecker. And so if you want to have a successful, I always tell the arrangers, if you want a successful arrangement with this band, just write a trumpet unison. It's going to sound like no other band in the world. You know, it's and then with John too, then you have 5. Oh, it's unbelievable. So he gets the best guys that can possibly that are available to play in the band, which is really good.
Wow. You mentioned Frank West, and he had a pretty important role in the Basie band during his tenure, didn't he?
Oh, sure. I think he was responsible for a lot of people being there. I know he got Thad in the band, and maybe Snooky. I mean, these are some of the most important people in the band, and of course he played the flute, and this was totally unique in the whole Basie tradition, and the sound that he brought, his contribution, and he's also another great arranger. I mean, not just a good arranger, he's a great arranger, and Frank Foster, and I mean, you ask Frank Foster who the best arranger in the band was, he always said Frank West. and it was great. It was great, just wonderful. And they all wrote this beautifully. I mean, they're still playing some of Frank's compositions with the band.
Yeah. There's one particular album I remember that they did with Frank Sinatra, where Frank's flute was so wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Just played behind it and added that great touch.
Yeah. Well, he does everything great. He plays alto great. He plays tenor great. Flute. I mean, he's another special case. He calls me. What does he say? He calls me his pastor. So I call him my musical director. Yeah, it's great. It's just to be able to play with real people and play music and just try to do your best. It's the greatest experience in the world. It's a great opportunity. Every once in a while I get these opportunities, and I don't underestimate really the richness of the whole thing. I really don't. It's just, for me, it's just so rewarding every time.
Great. Well, that sounds like a good note to wrap this up on. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and hope that your upcoming tours go as exciting as the Benny Goodman one was in Europe.
They're all different, they're all special, and they're all brand new things. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's exciting to come down to New York and feel the atmosphere. And I know the times change, but it's still great to see what's going on in the clubs. And I guess it must be hard to keep a big band together like the one we saw, that they don't tour all that much, do they?
Well, not any band tours a lot now, except the Basie band, I guess, is the only really working band. But there are a lot of, there are bands in New York now. Last I counted, there were about 24.
Yeah.
Which it was, a few years back, there were one hand, But Maria Schneider's band is an excellent band. She's been she's kept that together. And the Vanguard band is excellent. It's still a wonderful band, and there's a lot of bands.
Yeah, we've got an awful lot of great people to choose from to help them keep going. Yeah. Well, on behalf of Hamilton College, I'd like to thank you for your time today. And
thank you.
It's been fascinating.
Thank you. It's fun being here.
All right.